Hey everyone, welcome back to the MSL Podcast. I'm James McCormick.
And I'm Paul Hine. And this is presented by WMUA. So for this episode, we'll be talking about the success of the NHL's Four Nation Tournament, which replaced their All-Star Game this year. This is a new creation, and the tournament was between U.S., Canada, Sweden, and Finland. And honestly, that tournament to me was one of the highlights of the sports year in the sense that it was something new and exciting for people to get for sports fans to sink their teeth into, really. And for our club, one of the things we're about to sink our teeth into is the McCormick Sales Summit. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what's going on with the Sales Summit this weekend?
Yeah, so Sales Summit is this weekend. It is from February 28th from 3 to 8 and March 1st from 10 to 2. It's in the Eisenberg Atrium. And if you don't know what the Sales Summit is, the basic description is just you come and learn from and network with industry professionals. We got organizations this year like the New Jersey Devils, the Washington Commanders, the New York Mets, Hartford Athletic, the American Hockey League, UMass Athletics, and we have a keynote speaker from BSC Global.
That is awesome, man. I can tell you what, that kind of opportunity does not exist at a lot of places to talk to representatives from that high level of teams and that many. And if you're looking to get into sports, there's really kind of two paths from what I know is you either go into sales or you go into social media. And so if you're not really so much into, posting and pictures and video, go check out that sales summit because that is a prime opportunity for you to get connections that hopefully can get you a foot in the door in this industry.
Yeah, I went last year. It was a lot of fun. Networked with a lot of people. And this year, my friend Tom Ryan, he's been directing it. I've seen all the hard work he's put into it, and I'm excited to see how it turns out.
Great, yeah. So as far as recent stuff that's happened in MSL, I saw on LinkedIn that you and the rest of the executive board took a trip to New York. You want to tell everybody?
Yeah, I'll tell a little bit about it. So it was the 2024 E-Board. We take a trip to New York City, and we got to meet with a bunch of sports agencies. We met with Excel Sports Management, Wasserman, and Horizon Sports and Experiences.
That's awesome. And that's, when you say agencies, you mean like player management agencies, right? Like people who sign the contracts and that kind of negotiating process, right? So,
well, I mean, it's not just that, though.
Right.
Like when we were at Horizon, one of the things they were telling us about was the because the men's college basketball has like the Maui Invitational.
Yeah.
They saw that women's basketball didn't really have that, and so that's what they created basically for women's basketball.
Right. So also trying to create new opportunities.
Yes.
And that kind of thing. Can you tell us maybe what the highlight of talking to some of those agencies was, or what was like your key takeaway?
I think my key takeaway is like, because it was something I wasn't really thinking of as a career path until I went on the trip.
Yeah.
Like it showed me it was more than just like being a player agent. There's also a bunch of like other options when you're an agent, like with sponsorships and just like working with teams in general.
Definitely, yeah. I think agencies is one of those things that kind of go under the radar in the sports world.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the flashy job with the pro team, but you don't necessarily see some of the behind-the-scenes companies like agencies that really do a lot of the work. I know I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with the CEO of IdeaQuest, Eric Bechtel, on my other podcast, and he really laid out the path on sponsorships and how to make deals like that. So those sports agencies are uber important for teams to get their stadiums and their revenue up, like and running at all. So that's really cool that you guys got to do that opportunity. And if anyone who is currently in MSL is interested in doing something like that, run for executive board. You obviously get very cool opportunities for that. And even if you're not in MSL, I think joining the club gives you an exposure and in with some of those connections as well.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
I mean, being like very involved like I've been has just been nothing but helpful for my like sports career.
Of course, yeah. So let's talk about what our main topic is today. So
Gotcha.
the Four Nations tournament. So what was your initial reaction when you saw the NHL replace their All-Star game with this? Because to me it was, wow, this is something we've never seen before, and this is really unique.
I mean, I'll just say I didn't expect it to be this good because I just thought, because I'm just used to like with the NBA, like how they always switch it up every year. I thought it'd be something similar.
Yeah.
Even though it is like national or international hockey, I should say.
Yeah.
Which is always more competitive than, I wouldn't say always more competitive, but like when you compare it to international sports for like basketball, where like USA is always like winning.
Yeah. Well,
it's different in hockey.
I think the part of in that sense that made this tournament work was the fact that it was only NHL players. They limited it to just NHL players, and when you have just NHL players playing against each other, but they're in their countries, right? It's for national pride. So I think that really created some matchups that nobody had ever seen before. And in that way, they were able to draw new interest, and that clearly showed through the viewership numbers. They drew 16.1 million total viewers, and that was the second most for a hockey game in the last decade. And that was on the final, by the way. That was on the USA-Canada final. And the second most viewers for a hockey game in the last decade is a huge accomplishment for something that's its first year. Like, it is just getting off the ground. So I think for them, creating that kind of interest was a massive success for the NHL. I don't think they imagined that it was going to go this well.
Neither did I, because like personally, it fell under the radar for me. Because I love hockey, but it's not like the main sport I watch.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, maybe I'll check it out because it's something new.
Yeah.
And then I think what really helped is that like the players bought in.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if the players didn't care, I feel like we would not be talking about it right now.
Totally bought in. I mean, you watch that first USA-Canada game, and there's 3 fights in the first 9 seconds, and I don't think any of those players cared any more than that. I think Matthew Tkachuk said it best. He said that the USA-Canada championship game felt like it mattered more than Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, which to me, I was like, wow, so the NHL really got the players to buy in and believe in this product. And that's the only reason that it was really good, because without the players promoting it and believing in it, I mean, what do you have? You just have really something more like the NBA All-Star game and what we saw this year, where players are opting out or, sitting out in some cases on the day of. And there just wasn't a lot of action. There wasn't that feel that they were really even invested in it. So one thing I wanted to bring up was, you can see in that weekend there was a very stark contrast between the way the NHL created this new tournament and the way the NBA All-Star game kind of fell flat. So what in your opinion would be something that would make the NBA All-Star game elevate its success?
I think, I don't want to say adopting a similar format, but I think because we've had a lot of good players come from outside of the USA. I mean, I think our last 6 MVPs have all been from outside of the USA. And I think having a USA versus World game, which is, I believe the NBA has tried something like that before.
Yeah.
But I think just having that in general, I think the issue is also the players buying in.
Yeah.
Because you can watch like old All-Star games and you got like Jordan and Kobe going at it. And
yeah, well, there's just not a lot of defense anymore in the NBA All-Star game. And I think that's why people are finding it so boring. Like, threes are exciting to a point. You know what I mean? When they're just running the score up and it's kind of the same thing over and over again, it gets too repetitive. You know what I mean? You want to see some blocks. You want to see some matchups that you're actually excited to watch, and not just know that the defender is going to let them run by you. You know what I mean? And I think this is reflected in the viewership numbers for them. So they dropped actually 13% in their viewership numbers.
Yeah.
It was down to like 4.7 million, which is, I believe, like the lowest in 10 years.
I think it was either the lowest or it was like the second lowest in like recent history.
Yeah.
And I was kind of shocked to see it was like that bad, because I didn't mind the format that they tried.
No.
Because I liked that they tried switching it up. Because, staying with the same thing, that's just like the definition of insanity.
Yeah, I mean, they are trying in the sense that they kind of put like young stars versus, older veterans. And I do think that can be a recipe for success because you're showing off kind of the different eras of what the NBA has right now. but I do think that there still wasn't that flair behind it.
I think there was too many interruptions.
Yeah.
Like I saw it on Instagram, but like there was like 35 minutes of like game time,
Yeah.
and there was multiple games too. It wasn't just one game.
Yeah.
And then it was 2.5 hours of like interruptions
Yeah.
and like 86 minutes of commercials. It was something insane like that.
Yeah, so they probably do that. They sell so many commercials because they know they're not getting enough eyeballs on it. And so how do they make money from it? They're going to sell commercials, right? So they're overcompensating maybe. But I think where the strategy lacks in that is when you overcompensate with too many commercials, people get too bored. They'll turn off the TV or turn on something else. We're living in a world where your attention span for the average person right now is 6 seconds. So if you're not catching their attention all the time, they're going to tune out your product. So that's why I think the NHL did such a good job because, if you think about it, were you paying attention to the commercials at all? No. You cared about the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you stayed for the game to see that result. It obviously wasn't the same with the NBA. People were tuning out. That's just reflected in the numbers in the sense that the NBA All-Star Game had a quarter of what the NHL did in terms of viewership. So that's a pretty obvious difference in the strategy and how it worked out.
If anything, I think having the NBA kind of like, I don't want to say fail, but like flounder a little kind of helps the NHL because like, people turn that off and it's like, well, but the NHL, look what the NHL's doing right now. Let me tune into that. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
And it's also introducing like people who haven't watched like much hockey.
Yeah.
To see like I'm trying to think of how to describe it, but like
the stars of the game.
Yeah, like you get to see hockey at like its hot
at its best.
At its best.
You think about Connor McDavid scoring that goal, right? The big knock on him, the game-winning goal of the championship, of course. I mean, I forget like that I have to specify that, but you really hadn't seen him like win the big one, and that is winning the big one. Overtime, your Nations Cup is on the line. Like the championship of the first ever Four Nations, and he just pulls out this disgusting move in overtime to score that goal.
Yeah,
I think seeing the stars of the game in that sense perform against each other in new matchups is really what made their success so prominent.
And then like unsung heroes, like I'll say Jordan Binghamton. He was catching a lot of flack for the entire tournament, and then he goes to this championship game and plays like 2019 Binghamton.
Those two saves in overtime were absolutely insane. That glove side save where he just absolutely laid out for it, and I think that kind of excitement is exactly what's missing from the NBA, and that's such a contrast, And I do understand that, it's different in the sense that basketball's a very high-scoring game, and hockey's a very low-scoring game, obviously, but I do think there is a way to create excitement in that sense. It's hard to say that, if the NBA had done the same thing, like created a Four Nations of their own, that it would have succeeded similarly. What do you think about that? If they had done something similar, a similar tournament, would they have succeeded?
I think they probably would have had a better like numbers showing for the weekend. I think it's just tough to split it, at least for NBA, to split it like Four Nations.
Yeah, well, you can name the number of countries you want, but that international style of tournament.
Either like a tournament, they need to switch it up somehow because I think the issue is also what I brought up was how the NHL succeeded was having the players buy in. And that's not really an answer I have. I'm not going to go and pretend that I have the answer.
No. Yeah, and that's a tough one because I feel like that either has to come from the league commissioner or it has to come from the players union, but is there some sort of incentive that they can add to the All-Star game? And I know they already pay them, extra, but the amount that they're paying them to participate and play in the All-Star game means nothing to those guys when they're getting paid millions and it's like a couple $100,000 more, So can you incentivize it in a different way? Maybe like, I don't know, home court advantage, for example, in the playoffs. So like in the MLB, the way they do it is whoever wins the All-Star game gets home advantage in the World Series, right? So
I think they did just get rid of that though.
They
'Cause
did. You're right.
I was going to say, I was talking to my friend the other day.
No,
He's
you're
like,
right.
dude, they got rid of that. I'm like, wait, what?
You're right. They did just get rid of it, but traditionally that's how it had been
Yeah.
done. I think adding something like that into the NBA could make it a lot more interesting. The players would actually care. If you're on a team that has a chance of being in the playoffs, it means you have a chance to get in the finals.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, why would you not want to play at home?
Yeah.
And that was the whole incentive behind the way it was in the MLB for so long. So I think adding that kind of incentive, a non-monetary incentive, would really change that game for them.
I will say, I think it wasn't like COVID year. I think it was the year after the bubble.
Yeah,
And the NBA, there were still COVID restrictions.
Yeah.
And the NBA tried something different with the All-Star game. I did just remember this. This is like the last All-Star game I enjoyed, where like they had it so the players were playing for charities.
Yeah,
And
see, that's cool. Like that.
Like they were actually trying to win money for their charity of choice.
That's something they care about.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't care about an extra couple $100,000, and
At least the All-Stars don't.
right. And why should they? They're making, not only are they making what they're making off their contracts, which is millions, obviously, but they're also making a crap ton in endorsement deals. So they don't need that $100,000 or $200,000 that they're being offered to win the All-Star game. They need something that means something to them. You know what I mean? And if you can incentivize that, I think you completely change the way that they play.
Yeah. And I also liked how they switched it up because that's when they introduced the Elam ending also, which I found really cool. Because
Yeah.
I think it was because Kobe died, where they had for the fourth quarter, I believe, like it was the winning team plus 24 for the fourth quarter, and
That is
whichever
really
team reached that first won. And so it wasn't like timed. It was just,
Yeah.
straight hoops until that target score was reached. And I found that really cool.
And that's a great way to honor the history of the sport, too. And I think that's a great way to connect with the fans because the people who have been watching basketball and care about basketball can resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of move is smart as well. But is there anything else you have to say about the Four Nations, or I'm pretty good on that?
I will say, the previous record for a most watched game in the NHL was 8.9 million, and it was Game 7 of the 2019 finals. I don't know if that's a sore subject for you or not.
Oh, yeah. No comment from the Bruins.
I was going to say,
No comment.
Jordan Binghamton master classes for like the top two most watched
no
U.S.
comment.
hockey games.
No comment from the Bruins fan here for sure. I guess maybe the one question I had, and this is completely switching like leagues,
Mm-hmm.
but I was thinking about All-Star games in general when we were coming up with this topic, and what do you think about, could the Pro Bowl pull something like this off? Because I feel like the NFL, in some senses, maybe too Americanized to do an international tournament, but the Pro Bowl doesn't do very well in viewership either, even though the NFL is king in terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about the Pro Bowl trying something similar?
I don't know if an international like tournament is the way to go for the Pro Bowl. I definitely think
it wouldn't resonate, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of what I think too. But when I was thinking about All-Star games, I was thinking, okay, well, what's the best All-Star game? In my opinion, it's the MLB. But what are the All-Star games that people complain about? The Pro Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
the NBA All-Star game, and previous to this, the NHL All-Star game, right? So that's 3 of the 4 major ones. And the NHL All-Star game was probably like the second ranked of the 4.
I would say it was just.
But like the Pro Bowl is not very widely watched or cared about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think making it so it is more than just your all-star team, right? The players identifying with their country, that means something. That really means something to them. And that's why the Olympics are so fun to watch, right? I mean,
Yeah.
When you put on that USA jersey, you're representing everyone who matters to you, and I think that's something that you don't get when you're maybe just throwing on a 2025 All-Star jersey.
I mean, I don't know if it was true for the Pro Bowl. Did they used to wear their team's jersey, or was it just the helmet?
I'm not sure.
It might have just been the helmet, actually, now I think about it.
I'm not sure, but I do think the problem with the Pro Bowl is, obviously there's the whole player safety thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not real football. Like,
Yeah, I was gonna say we don't have like Sean Taylor lining out people anymore.
it's just not real football in the sense that not only is it flag, but you're doing too much gimmicky things.
Yes.
In the sense that, like, did you see they had people switch positions and like Jackson Smith and Jigba was throwing the
I saw
ball
that
from
he was
quarterback?
playing quarterback, and I mean I wasn't watching. Don't get me wrong, I was not watching, but
Yeah, I only watched a little bit of it, but you think about what are football fans tuning in to see? The best matchups, just similar to the Four Nations. That's not created in the Pro Bowl when you have people playing positions they don't ever play, So I do think there's some easy fixes for the NFL in that trying a tournament like this.
Yeah, it's like self-induced at a certain point.
Yeah,
because like you can watch like old Pro Bowls and like even like not even the game, just like they used to have like, or they still had the skill competitions, but like you look when it was like Drew Brees and like he had to do the accuracy test, like that was cool.
Speaking of skill competitions, what do you think about the NBA ones? Because this year specifically, Victor Wembanyama found a way to just kind of pass through that and still do well without even shooting the ball. So is that a system that works anymore? Is that going to be entertaining for people once everyone starts doing that?
Well, I mean, they did I don't want to say banned, but like they kicked them out of that competition.
Yeah.
Which I found pretty funny. They didn't even let them interview Chris Paul and Victor Wembanyama either.
Yeah.
Which I was like, why? Because, let them have if you're letting them have fun, like, can we at least interview the guys that just like gamed the system?
Yeah.
Like that was funny to me.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do think part of the problem with the All-Star games, like we can sit here and say, they should do this, they should do that, but it is easier said than done.
Obviously.
In the sense that to make any sorts of changes, you do have to go through like the players' union and like renegotiate and all that. In many cases anyway. Especially, we were just talking about the Pro Bowl. I'm just kind of generalizing about All-Star games now, but we were just talking about the Pro Bowl. If they wanted to change that to real not flag football, they really would have to figure out how does player safety factor in and what does compensation look like for someone who gets hurt during the Pro Bowl game, right? Do they get paid the rest of their salary for the year plus extra, because they participated in the Pro Bowl, and how does that work? So there are certain liabilities that do come out of the All-Star games that you wouldn't get out of a regular season or a playoff game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason that they are so hard to present a good product with.
Yeah, like you said, easier said than done.
Yeah.
And while like I could sit here and be like, oh, they should do this, they should do that. Would it actually work in reality is the question. Because I could say NFL go back to their roots, but what if they just start running into the same problems that made them change in the first place? Like,
Of course. Yeah.
I could sit here and be like, it was better back then, and the situation's changed.
No, obviously. I think before the Pro Bowl was flag football, we didn't really know about CTE, right? So,
I mean, I think the flag part was kind of new, right?
Well, relatively. I think like within the last decade or two, but I guess my point is we didn't really discover CTE as a condition until the early 2010s. I would say like 2010, 2011-ish.
It was probably like the court case.
Yeah.
Like Caldwell versus NFL.
Yeah, so I read, I forget the doctor's name, but the guy who discovered CTE, I read the book about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was around that time period. So we've only known about it for 15-ish years. So I do think that they would not go to a full-on pads football style all-star game unless they figure out a way to make the guardian caps so secure that CTE and concussions and etc. would not be a risk factor in that game.
I do like the moving with the guardian caps, like them actually making an effort
Yeah,
to limit concussions. But then like for fantasy, I had Romeo Dobbs and he was wearing the guardian cap, and then I still see like, oh, he got concussed today. I'm like, isn't he wearing the guardian cap? Like, it's not the end all be all fix that like I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah,
but
it's also, you gotta remember, it's still in the early stages of development. They've only had it for 2-3 years now, so.
And really only this year is when they were starting to wear them during the game.
Right, so it'll continue to get better as they go with that. We're a little off track, but while we're with football, let's talk about the NFL Combine that's going on right now. So, I know you had some points that you wanted to hit on that.
I just wanted, because I'm trying to like buy into it. I want to like try to learn more about like how like you like look at a player and like try to see like
scouting.
Yeah, scouting. That's a good word to use.
Yeah.
And so I think there's like some interesting points. I think like the big story that you're going to see on like ESPN and all like the major news outlets is all the opt-outs. We already had Shedeur Sanders opt out. Like he's not going to throw, he's not going to work out. He'll do it at his
Ward as well.
Potentially Cam Ward as well.
Yeah.
I thought he did say he was going to opt out, but then I was like looking it up today and like I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
So
the opting out is interesting to me because I think it has actually somewhat to do with the NIL standing, and now these guys know that they have a certain dollar value attached to their name, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so having that knowledge in the back of their mind, they know that if I get hurt during this, it could cost me X dollars from getting hurt, right? Like my opportunity cost may outweigh the cost of me not doing the combine. They're still going to get drafted. They're still going to get drafted very high. They're still going to get a great signing bonus because teams, they're honestly, well, with this draft in particular in those two cases, they are far and away the top two quarterbacks, it seems. Or at least they are consensus top 10 quarterbacks, you know?
Yeah.
So
or top 10 picks.
Top 10 picks.
I was going to say, they're definitely top 10 quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, top 10 picks is what I meant. So I do think in a sense that you get the security behind that and them knowing that they can opt out. And they're not going to advance their draft stock with doing this, right? They're really only risking it.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I can see the opportunity cost in that. It's certainly non-traditional, right? I don't think you would ever see in the era of like Tom Brady's draft, right? I don't think you would ever see a player opt out like this.
Mm-hmm.
But I can kind of understand the mindset now that these guys know what they're worth. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just, I think the point I want to bring up is that like ESPN is like, they're just going to like blow this out of the water. Like, oh my God, like Shedeur Sanders and then potentially Cam Ward if he even opts out.
Yeah, no.
And then it's like, are you really watching the combine for Shedeur Sanders? Like I obviously want to see him throw. We'll see that at his pro day. But like, you're not watching really the combine to see like a consensus top 10, top 5 pick.
No, you're seeing
you already know mostly what you're getting.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like some like freak accident's gonna happen where like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders can't throw over 15 yards anymore. Like we've seen them play.
Yeah.
Like you already know that they're great players and they're going to be drafted high.
Yeah.
I feel like the combine itself, you're kind of looking for like the players that have flown under the radar. You're going to see some name you haven't heard of.
Absolutely.
Top the 40-yard dash. Like
right. That I was just going to bring up this example from a few years ago of wide receiver of the Patriots drafted Tyquan Thornton. I'd never heard of him before, and then he got the record for the 40-yard dash. So that is something that the combine does provide. It does provide exposure for guys who may not have been drafted as high to get their draft stock up. But if you're kind of already a consensus, top 10 pick, you don't really need to draft that bad. The only thing that you're doing is risking injury. So in that sense, I do understand making sure your financial and future security is protected.
Yeah. Like you said, I can totally see it. And it's just like I want to see, what do the other guys got,
Yeah.
Because I believe Milroe still opted in, Jackson Dart.
Yeah, and that makes sense because for those guys, they have, I'm going to say less to prove. Or, no, sorry, more to prove.
Yeah.
They have more to prove than Shedeur and Cam Ward.
Because, Shedeur and Cam have already proved it. At least in my eyes.
Not that the other guys haven't, but I think to NFL scouts, maybe.
Yeah. Just because I feel like
the rest of them need to prove it more.
Dart and Milroe and just those tier quarterbacks, they're not. There's obvious flaws to them that
Yeah, you could even argue that about Shedeur and Cam in some ways.
Them too, yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's more of are they going to be worth a high pick, you know?
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be interesting to see what strategies teams go with quarterbacks this year because it's not a super deep class. But when you look at some of the other positions that are deep, it's like, okay, how do those get drafted around quarterbacks now? So, like, for example, running back position super deep. You know, you got Ashton Genty, Dylan Sampson, and Cam Scatterbo. Like, that's an insane running back class in its own. When I watched that ASU Texas game, that playoff game, I could not believe how incredible Cam Scatterbo was, and I think he really had shown that all year. But I wonder, you know, how does a guy like that who proved it in a new playoff format even, right, who proved that he can perform in the big game, how does he utilize the combine to either increase or decrease his draft stock, and does he feel like he needs to opt in or opt out, you know?
I feel like running back specifically, you can't really opt out. It's because it's running back position been debated for the past couple of years in the NFL. It's in a very weird position.
Yeah.
Especially with running backs trying to get new contracts when you have all this talent coming in from the running back class.
It's starting to come back now. You know, Derrick Henry. It's funny. I saw a tweet that Derrick Henry and Saquon made a group chat at the beginning of the year when they were both in free agency, and said, "How can we bring the running back position back because we're being undervalued right now?" And they both signed with major teams, and they both had major years, and one of them won the Super Bowl, right? So you do think about the players think about how the whole league is reacting monetarily to the trends that are going on. So they see what's going on, right? And like you said, I think this is the exact reason that, you know, Scatterbo or Genty or whoever would not opt out, right? Genty was one of the best running backs in college football.
So amazing to watch, dude. His stance is my favorite. Just straight up, just standing in the backfield, and then he just rips off a 75-yard touchdown.
He's a great player, right? And he doesn't need to elevate his draft stock anymore, but he's still going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I think the NFL Combine is one of those untalked about sports events where it is really interesting. There's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of preparation that goes into it. But at the end of the day, it's hard to get eyeballs on it because that doesn't matter as much as the draft. You know, people care a lot about the draft, but the investment, at least emotionally, into the combine and the pro days is not as high.
Well, I think it's because, like, you know, I don't want to say, like, if you're a casual if you don't watch the combine, because that's wrong to say.
No.
But it's tougher to buy in because it's not like a organized start to finish. It's just like, okay, we're doing this drill now, and then this guy's running the 40. And
you almost have to be really, like, nitty-gritty into scouting, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and you gotta know when each position group's going also. Yeah. So, like, if you want to look at the running backs this year, which I definitely do, because there's a lot of talent there.
I think that's also part of the problem is the combine lasts for so long. Some of it honestly doesn't need to be televised, you know? Like,
I mean, you could say that, but then, like, I see people online complaining that spring training isn't televised, so lose either way.
Well, that's a whole different situation with the MLB broadcast rights right now, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, that's a whole nother combo.
But I'm pretty good about talking about the combine. Do you have anything else to add?
I did want to talk about a certain running. I mean, we talked about Genty, led the FBS in scrimmage yards with 2,700 plus. We have Cam Scatterbo. I was looking up, like, his stats today. I think a good word that I saw online to describe him as versatile. You're getting the yards on the ground. He's getting the yards receiving also. Because you always have, like, your receiving specialist, but, like, Cam Scatterbo can do both. And that's something that's, like, amazing. He can also throw if you watch that Texas game.
Oh, yeah. He's one of those players that you can tell he really has that competitive fire in him. And I think that's something that...
He's got that dog.
Yeah. You get a player like that in the draft, and you can instantly elevate the fan interest in your team because what do people identify with? At least in a lot of areas, they identify with guys that care a lot and work hard, right? And that's Cam Scatterbo to a T. So I'm really excited to see what he does, at the Combine, and then what he can do in the NFL.
I will say another running back because I was doing some research today because I'm like, you know what, maybe I should actually, like, instead of just saying I'm going to do more research, maybe I should actually do the research.
Yeah.
I was looking at a certain running back from Tennessee, Dylan Sampson,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
he has had I don't want to say confusing because he won SEC Offensive Player of the Year,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of ups and but there's also some notable downs. Like, he had 4 fumbles in 6 games at a certain point this season, and that's a little concerning. But then, like, there's a lot of upside that I was seeing. Like, that is, if you watch, like, Dylan Sampson tape, that is a guy that will find the hole in the offensive line.
Yeah.
Granted, Tennessee does have a good offensive line, and if you get stuck behind, like, a Giants offensive line, your options might be limited, as you saw with Saquon. But
yeah, for a guy like that, I think the combine really matters.
yes,
You know, he was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, amazing player, but A, he didn't get a chance to prove it in the playoffs that much, and B, like you said, there were some underlying stats that maybe NFL scouts would be hesitant on when they're looking at him as a draft prospect. So for a guy like that, using the combine as an opportunity to elevate yourself and what, you know, the perception of you is among scouts is why the combine really does matter.
I think it'll help Sampson also, because we'll get to see some of his receiving, because something I was looking at was, like, Tennessee doesn't really throw the ball to their running backs, so, like, he only had, like, 30 or career catches, maybe it was like 30, and like, it's like, do you know if he can catch the ball, or is that going to be a liability?
Yeah, some guys have different play styles.
Yeah.
So, you know,
He's also a great run blocker. Also, I was watching some of the tape today.
Yeah,
He's great at run blocking. He runs, like, smart too. Like, he'll wait for, like, the defense to start collapsing on the O line, and then he'll break out. And he can also improvise. Like, I'm doing, like, just me talking about it is doing it a disservice. You got to, like, watch it to see it. I was actually, like, it was actually flying under the radar for me, honestly. Especially, let's see, rushing yards, 1491, and then he had 22 rushing touchdowns. Like, I don't think, did Genty have more? Probably. I'm assuming.
I believe so.
He probably had more rushing, but, like, Sampson coming close to that is kind of crazy, considering, like, the monster year Genty had. And Sampson didn't get any Heisman votes, and I don't know if I would have based on the season, just because we had really strong candidates. Like, Dylan Gabriel's someone, like, I'm confused on. That, like, I don't know if that's going to translate.
Yeah, it's hard because he's also played in so many different offenses.
Yeah.
But you could argue that either way, actually. You know, you could argue that playing in all those different offenses is going to make him more versatile and he'll be more well-rounded.
That's a good point, actually, yeah.
But you could also argue that, in that sense, that maybe he doesn't have a particular scheme that he likes or is going to stick to. And that's maybe the case, maybe not. You know, well, I think he's one of those guys that's in prove-it territory, even though he had a Heisman caliber season and has had that in the past as well. That's going to be interesting to see where he gets drafted. So I think the combine is really a good place for guys like him, guys like Sampson, to get a prelude into where they're going to be drafted.
Yeah. All right, so we'll end it with this. Who do you think's going number 1 in this draft? Because I'm actually excited that this is still a debated thing. Like, we could still debate about this until, like, the pick's in. Yeah.
I agree. This year there's no, like, consensus number 1 overall, which there usually is. So it does make it interesting to see where the top 4 is. You know, I honestly don't think Shadur or Cam gets drafted number 1. I think it's Abdul Carter.
I've been seeing a lot of Abdul Carter, like, I don't want to say his stock has jumped because he was by far, like, the best defensive player. Yeah. If you watched him just maul offensive lines, like, that's all you're going to see on the tape, just him completely, like, dominating in the trenches.
The fast twitch muscles that really separate him.
I'm seeing, like, comparisons to Micah Parsons, and I don't know if that's just because Penn State connection, but
I mean, yes and no. I think they do have a similar style of play. You know, you watch them and they get around the tackle really well.
Yeah.
But I think for Abdul Carter, he's going to benefit from the fact that, like we said, there is really no consensus number 1 overall pick, and that think about last year's quarterback draft class. We had like 8 or 9 quarterbacks get drafted in the first round. I believe it was 8. And
I think so, yeah.
I believe it was 8. It might have been 7, but that's not going to be the case this year.
No. I mean, if it was, I think there'd be, like, some serious red flags.
Right. So I think a lot of the other skill positions, and particularly defense, is going to benefit from that in the sense that it'll make the draft more interesting to see. Not every team's going to be thinking about quarterback. They're going to be thinking about who's the best available player.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking along the lines of that strategy is probably one of the smarter things that you could do if you're going from a pure talent standpoint.
I don't know, because I feel like Abdul Carter's you can argue, obviously he's like the best player in this draft. I don't know how I see Tennessee not going quarterback.
Maybe.
Because they need a quarterback.
Maybe, yeah.
And you don't want to draft Abdul Carter and then next year to like the number 1 seed again, or like a top 3 pick to get one of the quarterbacks from next year's draft.
Let's put ourselves in the head of a GM here. We already kind of are, but let's think about, you could draft Abdul Carter number 1, and then you could trade your second round pick and a bunch of other stuff up for a pick in, let's say the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Let's say they get the number 8 overall pick or whatever. I don't know who has that pick, but let's say they trade up in the top 10. They can still get a great quarterback. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Think about, the Bears had 1-9 last year, and that worked out really well for them. So, you can take that sort of a strategy. Yes, you do sell off your future a little bit, but at the same time, you know what your needs are as a franchise, and I think that's a GM decision. It's funny when everybody first gets into the sports industry. I feel like they always want to be a GM. It's what I wanted to do. It's like what everyone that I knew who wanted to be in sports wanted to do, and then you look into what is actually required of that job and how long it takes to get there, and also the job security involved with that. The average GM lasts like 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
In pretty much any league you look at. So I do not envy the job of a GM in drafting for sure, but it'll be interesting to see how this draft comes out.
I'll just say, because I didn't pick a player, I'll say Cam Ward. I think he's like my QB1.
Yeah. Of the 2 options there, I would agree.
I was going to say, it's really only 2 options if you're going quarterback.
Yeah.
Especially number 1.
Yeah. I have been seeing a lot of Jackson Dart hype, but I don't think he's getting picked.
I could see him to the Giants. I don't know if my friends will be happy to hear that. I could see him going to the Giants and hopefully developing. Like they get a bridge quarterback and let him develop. That'd be best case scenario. But do you spend the 4th overall pick on a development?
We have the 4th overall. The Patriots have the 4th overall pick.
Giants have 3?
Two
they don't have 2. Do they?
It's 3.
No, yeah.
It's 3.
It's 3.
I remember because the Patriots went from 1 to 4. I keep saying we. The Patriots went from 1 to 4 in the last week.
Yeah.
And I was not too thrilled with that. But now that I'm thinking about it, 2 and 3 picks are going to be quarterbacks. It just depends on who's who. But number 1 could be Abdul Carter, and then we either have the Patriots. I keep saying we. Travis Hunter either falls to 4 or Abdul Carter falls to 4. Either way, it's a good position to be in if you're the New England Patriots. So.
I don't know if the Giants would take. I mean, I guess maybe they would take Dart at the 4, or 3. Sorry, but I don't know because I feel like if both Ward and Shadur are gone, would they go somewhere else?
Right. Yeah, we'll have to see. You could see the quarterback panic like happened last year, right? I think that's exactly what happened last year, where nobody expected the Falcons to draft Michael Penix at number 8, and they did, right?
Yeah,
even
and then
though they had Kirk Cousins.
That kind of shook it up for like the other teams that needed, like Raiders. Raiders didn't even draft a quarterback; they drafted Brock Bowers, and that was still a great pick.
No, that was an amazing pick for them. But
then like Minnesota took McCarthy.
Right.
Broncos got Nix.
It'll be interesting to see how the top 5 goes because you're right. You could see quarterbacks go 1 and 2, and then what happens after that? Are the teams who are looking for a quarterback panicking, or are they thinking, okay, we're going to sign a guy in free agency instead?
And then like hope for the best, like they get a high draft pick next year.
Yeah, I mean that, or like I said, you can trade up, but I think free agency is an underrated part of NFL signings. I'm just going to say, like, particularly the quarterback position. I think people who have a high pick are always thinking like, oh, we're going to get a quarterback to save our franchise.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work like that. Think about, you throw a rookie QB into a bad situation, he's not going to succeed as well as if you threw a veteran QB into a bad situation who knows how to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
So I think, the top 5 will be interesting to see how that works out. But that's pretty much all I have on this draft.
I'll just say I'll make the point with the quarterbacks. I feel like they should not be thrown into the fire as soon as week 1 starts. Like I really liked what the Patriots did with Drake May. Yeah,
I agree.
Letting him sit on the bench and then season. I don't want to say the season was obviously over, but like, okay, we're at a point where we're not competing this year. Let's just let May get some no pressure reps in, and let him not only let him develop like sitting, but like now we could throw him into the game and let him get game time reps. But like if you lose, like it's whatever.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's all in the strategy, But I think I'm good on the combine.
Yeah, I think I am too.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. This has been episode 2 of the MSL Podcast. Go check out the Sales Summit in the Eisenberg Hub, right?
Yep.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow and Saturday. Yeah, so tomorrow and Saturday, go check out the Sales Summit. Great opportunities to meet if you're in sports sales or not.
I mean, just sport management in general, honestly. It's a great opportunity.
Or even sales in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people who get into the sports industry think that you have to be a sports management major. You don't necessarily have to be. There are transferable skills in sales anywhere, right? If you're selling a pen, it's not the same as selling a ticket, but there are a lot of transferable skills. So go check out that event tomorrow and Saturday. And we hopefully will see you soon.
Yep.
Thank you guys for listening.
I'm Jason McCormick.
I'm Paul Hine.
See you guys later.
Signing off.